Published 0545 Est, the 11th of November 2017. Updated 1426 Est, the 11th of November 2017. Nearly 100 years since the guns fell silent to call an end to the horrors of the First World War, millions of people are remembering Britain's war dead during Armistice Day commemorations across the nation. Usually bustling streets, squares, and railway stations came to a halt as passers-by paused for 2 minutes at 11 a.m., marking 99 years since the end of the conflict on November 11, 1918. In London, Big Ben had the hour for the first time since it was halted for repairs in August, and crowds gathered at the Cenotaph in Whitehall for the Western Front Association's annual service of remembrance. Scroll down for video. Past and serving servicemen joined well-wishers at the Cenotaph in Whitehall, London, to lay wreaths and hold a 2-minute silence at the Western Front Association's annual service of remembrance, which began at 11 a.m. Men in military uniform take part in the Western Front Association's annual service of remembrance at the Cenotaph, Whitehall. Members of the Western Front Association at the Cenotaph after a service marking the Armistice Day in Whitehall in central London. A member of the RAF Regiment guards the Cenotaph as wreaths are laid at service to remember servicemen and women killed in conflict. Armistice Day marks the end of the World War I, when Germany and the Allied forces signed the armistice, signaling the end of hostilities on the Western Front. Pictured the scene at the Commando Memorial at Speen Bridge at 10:45 a.m. The National Memorial Arboretum, in Staffordshire, began an outdoor service of remembrance within the walls of the Armed Forces Memorial. A member of the Royal British Legion salutes after laying a wreath at the War Memorial during a service of remembrance at Royal Wootton Bassett, Wiltshire at 10:45 a.m. The National Memorial Arboretum, in Staffordshire, started an outdoor service of remembrance within the Armed Forces Memorial, led by the Duke of Gloucester. There were similar events in Edinburgh's Gardens of Remembrance and in the centre of towns including Royal Wootton Bassett and Henley-on-Thames. In Sheffield, more than 100 artists joined residents to hold a remembrance ceremony next to trees planted in 1992 on former pupils of Westways School who died in the war. The 53 trees on Western Road in Crooks are threatened by the City Council's controversial tree-felling programme. Commemorations also took place across Europe to remember the conflict, including at the Menin Gate at Ypres, where Princess Anne represented the British contingent, and in Paris, French President Emmanuel Macron attended a wreath-laying ceremony in front of the Tomb of the Unknown Solr at the Arc de Triomphe. There will be other major events in the UK later today to mark the 99th anniversary of the end of the First World War, including the annual Royal Festival of Remembrance, which starts at 7 p.m. and will be attended by the Queen. This year the event at the Royal Albert Hall will mark the centenaries of women's service in the regular armed forces, the Battle of Passchendaele, the creation of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and the 100th birthday of Force's sweetheart, Dame Vera Lynn. It will also commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Battle of El Alamein and the creation of the RAF Regiment. Other royals attending the service on Saturday include the Duke of Edinburgh, the Prince of Wales, the Duchess of Cornwall, and the Duchess of Cambridge, who is pregnant with her third child. People observe a 2-minute silence during a service of remembrance at the National Memorial Arboretum in one of many services of remembrance across the country. MPs including Michael Fabricant gathered next to a monument at the National Memorial Arboretum showing 4 stretcher-bearers carrying a wounded comrade. Serving servicemen and veterans gather at the Commando Memorial at Speen Bridge in Scotland, where they observed a 2-minute silence as a mark of respect for the war dead. Standard-bearers lower their colour flags as people observe a 2-minute silence in memory of those who have fallen in conflict during a service at the Edinburgh Gardens of Remembrance in East Princes Street Gardens. People observe a 2-minute silence in memory of those who have fallen in conflict during a service of remembrance at the Edinburgh Garden of Remembrance Priti Patel Centre and the Mayor of Whittam Joanne Williams. During the annual service of remembrance at Whittam War Memorial in hundreds of ARNS members add on during the service at the National Memorial Arboretum, which is home to more than 330 memorials. SOLRs parade and pay their respects as they attend the annual Armistice Day service at the National Memorial Arboretum. Bands, men and women and attend the annual Armistice Day service at the National Memorial Arboretum, which is set over approximately 150 acres. This image, created using a graduated grey filter, shows a crowd of people listening to a vicar speaking during a remembrance service at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. They will be received by John Moynihan, President of the Royal Albert Hall, and Air Marshal David Walker, President of the Royal British Legion. Some war veterans and military personnel will mark Remembrance Day 452 feet in the air. They have been offered a trip on board the world's tallest moving observation tower, the British Airways I-360 in Brighton, East Sus, on Saturday. The 30-minute trip, taking in views of the English Channel and Sus coastline, begins at 10:45 a.m. and the 12 minutes silence will be observed while the glass pod is at the top of the tower on Brighton seafront at 11 a.m. Members of the public can also join in. To mark Armistice Day, the tower lights will turn red on Saturday evening. Scots Guards Army Cadet Force member Nathan Skinner, 13, views crosses in memory of those who have fallen in conflict ahead of a service at the Edinburgh Garden of Remembrance. Nathan stands with veterans while reading a service book before the start of the service of remembrance in the Edinburgh Gardens of Remembrance. People attending a service of remembrance at the Edinburgh Garden of Remembrance hold up a sign saying they gave their today, 4-hour tomorrow a memorial cross in memory of those who have fallen in conflict ahead of a service at the Edinburgh Garden of Remembrance in East Princes Street Gardens. A bugler plays the last post to start the silence during a service of remembrance at Royal Wootton Bassett Field of Remembrance at Lydiard Park. Royal British Legion standard bearers march to the War Memorial during a service of remembrance at Royal Wootton Bassett. Members of the Royal British Legion, serving military and dignitaries at the War Memorial during the 2-minute silence of remembrance at Royal Wootton Bassett. Thousands of crosses are planted at the Field of Remembrance at Westminster Abbey during the Armistice Day celebrations in London on Sunday. The Queen will from a balcony along with the Duke of Edinburgh as Charles lays a wreath on her behalf at the cenotaph, where men in military uniform gathered today. Charles will lead the nation in honouring the country's war dead in what is believed to be the first time the Queen has broken with tradition and not performed the symbolic duty when at the Whitehall service. Picture the scene at the cenotaph today. A Royal Marine bugler plays the last post and reveille at the Imperial War Museum before the 2-minute silence observance as part of Armistice Day commemorations. The Royal Marine bugler stood on a platform next to a vintage artillery gun as he performed in front of dozens of visitors at the Imperial War Museum on Sunday. The Queen will from a balcony along with the Duke of Edinburgh as Charles lays a wreath on her behalf at the cenotaph. Charles will lead the nation in honouring the country's war dead in what is believed to be the first time the Queen has broken with tradition and not performed the symbolic duty when at the Whitehall service. The change is seen as an example of the subtle shift of head of state duties from the 91-year-old sovereign to the heir to the throne. Royal Mint graphic designer Stephen Taylor was inspired by John McCrae's poem In Flanders Fields in creating the commemorative £5 coin. A famous war poem was the inspiration for the 2017 Remembrance Day coin. Royal Mint graphic designer Stephen Taylor was inspired by John McCrae's poem In Flanders Fields in creating the commemorative £5 coin. A donation from every purchase will go to Imperial War Museums. Mr. Taylor said, "I started my research by looking at words and symbols that are connected with Armistice Day, but realizing that the poppy is by far the most synonymous with remembrance and the traditions that surround it, that became my focus. I chose natural poppies with a realistic, wildflower quality, echoing the flowers John McCrae would have seen growing when he wrote the poem, In Flanders Fields. It's a poignant reminder of the brave men and women who have lost their lives or been injured in conflicts past and present, enabling new life to grow from their sacrifice." Military personnel observed the 2-minute silence and service outside Henley-on-Thames Town Hall. Armistice Day commemorations. Henley-on-Thames cadets gathered in front of Henley-on-Thames Town Hall for the 2-minute silence as military veterans held colour flags on the steps. A man in army uniform salutes during a 2-minute silence held to mark Armistice Day in Henley. 99 years since the end of the First World War, people stop for the 2 minutes silence at Henley Town Centre during Armistice Day commemorations in a scene replicated across the country. Usually bustling streets, squares and railway stations fell silent as passers-by paused for 2 minutes at 11 a.m., marking 99 years since the end of the conflict on November 11, 1918. Picture the scene in Henley. Princess Anne Centre attends the last post-ceremony at the Commonwealth War Graves Commission of the Ypres Memorial at the Meningate. Poppies rain down on attendees during the last post-ceremony at the Commonwealth War Graves Commission's Ypres Memorial. French President Emmanuel Macron attends a wreath-laying ceremony in front of the Tomb of the Unknown SOLR at the Arc de Triomphe. In Paris, Mr. Macron lays a wreath in front of the statue of Georges Clemenceau during the Armistice Day commemorations marking the end of World War I in Paris.